Hello, everybody. Do you hear me? Well, I'm supposed to be. Yes, thank you. Dr. Dizon, do you hear me? I promoted you to panelists. You should, right now, you should have permission to share your screen if you have any and to speak also. Just a minute. Hello, Dr. Dizon. Do you just open your...
Okay, that worked.
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, good.
Okay, just a minute.
So I do not have a presentation, but I can certainly, I was hoping this could be a conversation and maybe you can moderate
Yes,
any questions.
yes, just a minute. I'll come back to you, Dr. Dizon. Thank you
Yeah,
for your joining us.
yeah.
Dear participant, welcome to the third program of the Kscien Spotlight. We hope in this short time you can bring for you the most experienced researcher all over the world. Fortunately, in this night, we have Dr. Professor Dizon. He's an oncologist who specializes in women cancer. He's a director of Humanist Cancer and Brown University Health Cancer Institute, and also he's a director of medical oncology in Radio Islam Hospital. He interested in the novel treatment of human cancer and issues related to survival. He obviously authors hundreds of publications, include peer-reviewed articles, books, book chapters, and most importantly, I think is most interesting for us is the editor-in-chief of CA, a cancer journal for clinicians. I think most of the researchers will know this journal, which is journal with the highest impact factor. Really, it's very fortunate for us tonight to have this experienced researchers. We hope with the Dr. Dizon you can enjoy a productive time. Dr. Dizon, go ahead, it's your mic, and thank you again in the name of Kscien organization and the attendance. We thank you for giving us this valuable time, and thank you again and again. Go ahead, Doctor.
Oh, no, absolutely happy to do it. Thank you, Fahmi, for the introduction. Probably what I would do just to get us started, because again, I don't really have much slides around the topic that I've been asked to speak about, which is really publishing in peer-reviewed journals. I can tell you that, I've been at this now for probably close to 28 years, where I've been publishing articles. And I do think, honestly, it is much easier for me, a native English speaker, native English writer, and also with the mentorship I had as a resident and as a fellow has sort of trained me how to think in the scientific method, and also specifically to write for American journals. And I do still believe that that is an issue that um, there's a group of us in the United States who are really looking to help craft better opportunities for international colleagues to publish in the journals in English, which is oftentimes, as I understand, can be a barrier to publication. But for the most part, I essentially started my research career publishing retrospective studies because I thought those are the easiest things to do, especially as a researcher who did not have much in the way of a reputation with, say, industrial colleagues who are running clinical trials. So I think the first thing I would say for anyone who's starting in research is immerse yourself in a clinical environment. And if you're struck with a scenario where you're not clear where recommendations or decisions are coming from, that's a clue for you to ask the question. And I think what I've, as an example of this, for when I started my career in ovarian cancer, I was at an institution where they frequently were giving 8 or 9 cycles of chemotherapy rather than just the standard of 6 cycles. And I ultimately ended up asking the question, why are you giving more than the 6? Is there an advantage to giving more chemotherapy in ovarian cancer than not? That prompted a literature search, and you realize that there's not a lot of data that's out there. So it was an opportunity for me to look at our population because we had people who were getting more than 6 cycles and those who just got 6. And in a retrospective analysis, showed that more treatments didn't improve survival outcomes compared to the 6. And that was a contribution to the literature. Now, critical to what Fahmi you wanted me to talk about, the question is always more important than where you're going to place that paper in the journals. Okay. So if you attempt to, say, design a study to get into the New England Journal of Medicine, that's a harder thing to do because A, you have no idea what the outcomes are, and B, there's no way to really judge whether that project is going to be practice changing. Okay, those are harder to do. But what is not hard to do is to ask what you believe is a clinical question that is relevant to where you practice. Because I have often seen, and I've seen this when I work with colleagues in Tbilisi, Georgia, all the way out to Bangladesh and Dakar. The work that we're doing internationally can still inform practice patterns across the world and in the United States. Okay. So coming up with the question, coming up with methods of how you want to answer that question, and then also working with statisticians, either in your institution or maybe outside, who can look at that data, can actually take your question, take your data, and do the analysis are the 3 critical steps to the scientific method. And then with that analysis, I think that the challenge is to not use the data to fit into a bias. So oftentimes we'll do these studies, like I mentioned, does more chemotherapy improve outcomes? I might have had a bias to say it absolutely does improve outcomes. And I could also craft the analysis to show that it might improve the outcomes. So really remaining neutral when you're looking at that data and then interpreting that data with neutrality is really important, even if it goes against what you believe is the quote right outcome, because all of that will help build your career in academic research. And that one paper might produce, say, a clinical trial idea. Back in the day, you could ask that question: 6 versus 9 cycles of chemo. We asked this question with the drug bevacizumab in Europe, for example, in ovarian cancer. Should you give 15 months, or is there a benefit to prolonging that to 36 months of bevacizumab? We show that there's no benefit beyond 15 months of therapy. Okay. Okay, so and I love this. So what I'm gonna do is just as questions come up, Fami, I think we can just go ahead and answer
Yes.
them.
Yes.
Right? So
Do
yeah,
you
go
see
ahead.
the questions of the participant? Do you see it? I think you
No,
see
but
it.
I know maybe I do, but why don't you go ahead and just stop me and ask them, and then that way we know that we're getting to everybody's.
We just received with a question said, how do you know
Yeah.
my question is a valid question and not wasting my time
Yeah.
finding an answer for a wrong question? How do you
Yeah,
know?
I think
How to validate your question?
right. I mean, I think that's a really, really important one because I can tell you even today, I am interested in a pathway and I'm interested to see if that can predict, say, a response to immunotherapy in a very rare ovarian cancer. And I have these residents that are working on, they're training in medicine, they want to be oncologists, and they're working on this one question, which was really something that I just kind of thought about, and I thought that would be interesting. So I think the first ways you can say that is A, you can perform the literature search. Just see what's been done around the question that you have. See what answers have been, published in the existing literature. And if you still feel that the way you want to answer the question hasn't been um, appropriately discussed in what's already been published, then I think that makes it legitimate. Because if someone has published on the question you have, it proves it's valid. Now, it's not necessarily true, right? If no one's answered your question, it must be stupid. That is not true. It may be a question no one else has really thought about. And that's actually the power of science because we always question, how we're doing things and what the current quote standards are. We have to be the ones to question that because that's how the field moves forward. So I think the other thing I would say is if you're concerned that the question you want to ask is not, it may be a waste of time, that's where you go to peers and to mentors to sort of explain why you're asking the question. Because at the end of the day, really, it's one thing to have a question, but it's another thing to explain to others why you asked that. Okay. And I think both of those are really important. I do not believe that there are questions that are not relevant in science. Okay. Some of them may have already been answered and you just don't know where to look for that answer. That's why mentors are important. That's why we have, people who have been doing this a long time and they have both their experience, but they're also, hopefully, they have the knowledge of the field to hopefully guide you towards maybe that's not the question you ask, but this one is, So, for example, maybe we do give chemotherapy for all sorts of ovarian cancers, but does it really work in this specific one? You know, those are all really legitimate questions, and you can always find a way to sort of frame it. Now, so what I would say for all of you who are looking to publish, I think starting with honing in your craft in clinical research is the most important step rather than having your goal to publish 4 papers by the end of your first year of independence. You want to really make sure that the work you're doing is something that you value and that your colleagues will ultimately value as well.
Okay. Just I received another question
Mhm.
private. You're asking, what are the most common reasons you are rejecting a paper submitted to
Mhm.
your journal? What are the most common, for especially desk rejection when you receive a paper,
Yeah.
just reject? What are the most common reasons?
Yeah, so this is a really important question too. And I think it comes down to the specific journal guidance. And I think what I'm seeing, and I'm going to talk specifically about CA now. So CA, just FYI, has an impact factor of 521. To put that in perspective, the New England Journal of Medicine has an impact factor of 90. Okay. I think the reason why CA has such a high impact factor is two. We publish the American Cancer Statistics every year. It is the one most frequently cited paper in the United States and elsewhere. But we also collaborate to publish global cancer statistics. And every single person who writes an article on cancer cites one or both of those figures. All right. So it is a very frequently cited article. Um, because of it, this is what actually allowed us to say, you know what, we want to use this sort of platform we have to publish original research, but specifically phase 3 clinical trials. We had not done this before. We just published our first phase 3 clinical trial out of China, and it was on nasopharyngeal cancers and was looking at a radiation therapy question. Okay. So that was in response to something that I am personally invested in, which is publishing high impact phase 3 trials that are going to change standards of care. If you look at the journal, really, really important, you go to the information for authors page, because that will tell you specifically how to submit to the journal. The reasons we don't accept things: A, they're submitted without permission.
Mm.
So, you know, anyone who just submits a paper to CA and there hasn't been a conversation about the piece, that is automatically returned without review. Okay. The second thing we've done now is because we curate what comes into CA, you know, we think about it. I have a team of editors that help me, but we think about what topics we want to cover in that year. It doesn't mean that if that topic isn't there or if you are not chosen as an author, you have no opportunity to publish in CA. That is not the case. There are ways you can ask the journal, which will then come to me about topics. So I would like, you know, this topic hasn't been covered in CA. I'd be interested in taking that on. There's a review of what that topic is, and a response would come. This is coming from me personally about whether or not we feel the topic is interesting, okay, based on what we published in the past, and also in context to what our global charge is, which is to cover all of the topics of cancer from prevention all the way to end of life care. Okay, so if it's a topic that we think might be worthwhile, then we may ask for an outline and authors. And we look at both of those very closely, your authors and also what you plan to cover. I actually review every single one of them. And then I would provide comments about both. And that goes back to you. So what I'm saying is there's a conversation that happens even before you write an article for CA.
Yes.
So an automatic rejection would be something that is submitted to CA already written without that conversation happening. That isn't automatically rejected because, again, it's outside of what is supposed to be a process to sort of curate a topic so that it's appropriate for the journal. The other thing that is an automatic rejection is actually research. Okay, so we, outside of phase 3 clinical trials, we do not publish research. So something that says we did, a cancer database review in my country to look at how often this cancer occurs, that's research. Okay, and we would not take that in. Then the final thing that's oftentimes rejected outright are things that American Cancer Society is really interested in, has working groups for, and they publish together. For example, smoking cessation, survivorship topics, financial toxicity. These are issues American Cancer Society is doing. And then, so if someone, from France submits a topic in this area, oftentimes there's an overlap in the content from the American Cancer Society, and that is ultimately rejected and referred elsewhere.
Okay. Another question, do you recommend using software, especially AI, in research writing, manuscript writing? Do you recommend?
So the issue with AI has been actually been discussed at a more global level. So our publisher is Wiley. It's a global publishing firm, and they have multiple journals under their umbrella. So one of the things that Wiley has done is for all of its journals, try to come up with a universal harmonized policy on the use of AI. What we specifically ask for is, one, if you used AI, we need it disclosed. How was AI used in your writing? And the second thing is that an AI program cannot be listed as an author. And the reason for that is if your paper is challenged, your AI program cannot respond for you. Okay. So because there may be a process that might ultimately end in retraction that has a consequence for you as an author, that burden is never shared with AI. Okay. AI does not have a quote stake in any of this. So for that reason, AI is not considered as an author in papers that are submitted to Wiley, including in CA.
Okay, so you don't care if you use AI, but you need disclosure and responsibility. The author should take the responsibility. Okay.
Right. Right. Well, we do care. We care that you use AI. We want to know how it was used.
Yes. Is there any
Yeah.
specific use that is prohibited by you? For example, how you do interfere if you use AI and at the end of the draft, the author declare that this AI has been used, this is a
Mhm.
version, and the author take responsibility. Is that anything wrong with this style or?
I can tell you that that has not yet come up regarding AI authorship. What I've seen, and I think a part of it is because what we publish in CA is mostly reviews, right? That's mostly what we publish. I can tell you that editorial systems have AI programs to look for AI crafting within the manuscripts. So it is in your best interest to disclose. We would probably frown upon a paper that was solely written by AI, especially if we found that the reference did not respond to true references, which is the problem with AI programming.
Yes, that's right.
But for now, I can honestly tell you the issue of AI generated content has not come up for the kinds of content that we would take to CA.
Yes. Another participant asks, do you recommend for early career researchers to submit to a high-ranked journal, or do you think that non-experienced um, um, researchers at the beginning of his career
Mm.
to submit to a high-ranked journal, not yours, I know
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
style of yours, other
yeah.
high-ranked journal?
You know what? I don't see a harm in that. So, for example, for people that I mentor in their research careers, once a paper is written, then this is where the nice thing about mentors coming in. I can help them choose a journal to submit to. Oftentimes, what I'll say is we should submit this to a top tier journal because either of one of two things is going to happen. A, is going to be rejected without review, in which case, they didn't think the topic was sufficiently important enough for them to even review it. But the second option may also happen, which is it is not only sent for review, but you get feedback back, even if it's rejected. And that feedback is the most important thing we can use as authors. Okay, because sometimes we work on a paper for months, we get blind to its weak spots. Those reviews that come back, especially good reviews, where someone has actually taken the time to really take a look at your paper, those reviews always end up making a paper better. So that if you go to then a second tier journal, it is more likely to be accepted. And that has been my experience.
Yes. We have another question asking, we as a non-native, how can we improve our writing quality, or which software do you prefer, or you just recommend to be all piece of writing reviewed by a native one, which is very difficult for
Mhm.
us to find one every time.
Yeah,
What's your
yeah.
recommendation?
So I don't know about uh, uh, native English programs that can look at your papers. So I can't really speak on that. Obviously, it would be best to have a native English writer help you in your crafting of the manuscript. I can tell you when I was in a place of another journal where the content that I was responsible for was more narrative medicine, which is more about, storytelling, that I would work very closely with authors across the world in crafting their story, making suggestions, going through several drafts so that we could publish their piece. We would do that for the ASCO, American Society of Clinical Oncology, the education book, for example, when I was editor in chief for 10 years there. We worked with authors across the country in how to frame their words better. And I think in some societies, in international societies, there's actually some forums where people can actually work on papers or get some manuscript tips. Beyond that, I think it comes up, you actually raised a very important point as well, which is ghostwriting. So say you've written a piece and you give it to somebody else to review, and not only do they edit it for style, but they add additional content to it. That there's a line, and it's very difficult to say what that line is, where someone is reviewing to the point they should become an author. Okay. And disclosing that help has happened is important. And what I've done in the past where that has happened, I've asked for correspondence that demonstrates the level of support that happened. Now, I have taken articles to CA where that has been done and disclosed, especially from international authors where they say, for example, we worked with a professional English writing service to improve the readability of this piece. It was disclosed. Okay, that's fine. I think that's absolutely fine to do. You just need to disclose.
Yes. Just another question. I received so many questions. I think we cannot answer one by one, and some of them in contents of your talk you have already answered. So
Okay.
I just revised for you. One of the question, in your opinion, for a researcher to be a good one, do you depend on number of citations? Do you depend number of publications? Do you depend on what? Who is a good researchers in your view?
Who's good senior
Researcher,
authors?
yes, a good researcher, a good
Oh,
author.
researcher.
It depends on number of citation or number of publications per year or what.
No, I think that's a harder thing. I think when I look, so okay, I'll take you to the process. This is how I'll answer it. When we take it to the point of how do we find who to invite for pieces, right? So say we've decided on 5 topics to solicit. Okay, this is where CA actually invites people to submit papers. Okay. So that process is actually something that we do as an editorial team. So between the 5 of us, we say, okay, these are the topic areas. Does anybody have any thoughts on who we should invite? And then if we don't, we go to the wider editorial board of CA, which includes the journal Cancer's editorial board. And it's this wider group of people who then suggest authors to invite for us. Very rarely are we going into the literature and finding people based on citations, H-index, or anything like that, or content areas. So really, your reputation is what brings people to light for invitations to author for CA. The reason that I think I got the job as editor in chief is that I have relationships with many people due to the decades I've been in oncology, and so they actually that was actually a plus for the journal that I had relationships with other people, and I also knew who I could ask, because the goal at CA was really to broaden the opportunities for authorship so that it wasn't just Americans that were writing all the content in CA. One of my goals actually is to ensure there is a global viewpoint that's being expressed. So, for example, when statistics came out, I had two authors, one from Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, one from Bangladesh, joining me to write an editorial. I had a companion editorial from a group from Israel who work with someone in the United States. This is really important, global voices, patient voices, both of those are priorities for me going forward. But the reputations that you develop are,
sorry, I
but
thought
the
you did.
reputations,
So,
right? But
yes.
remember, the reputations you develop are based on your work,
Mm,
right? So your work gets you invited to other opportunities, whether that's participation on an international clinical trial, invitations to speak in international organizations, networking. Okay, your reputation doesn't come out of nowhere. It's built on a record of achievements within the field you're in.
yes. Okay, as a question, I think it's also my question. Do you recommend to establish a new journal for developing countries like ours in Iraq and Iran? Do you think we need a special journal, a high-ranked
Mhm.
journal, or just you follow what's already in the field?
Well, I think there are those opportunities for global art authors, right? There's for in the cancer space, for example, right? There's the JCO Global Oncology uh, Journal, which was the editor in chief was Gilberto Lopes, who's at Miami now.
Mhm.
If you look at the GYN cancer space, there's the International Journal for Gynecologic Oncology, and there's also the Breast Journal and Breast Oncology space. So those opportunities do exist. You cannot craft a journal to be a high impact journal. Okay. So that happens because people are publishing in that journal, but the publications represent the minority of what they are taking. All
Mhm.
right. And the papers that they're publishing are heavily cited. These are not factors you can really manipulate.
Okay. There are several other questions, but I think some of them already answered. There's most of the participants stress on those points that you select to publish a manuscript.
Yeah.
Which aspect of the article is most interesting for you to decide? Okay, this is mine. This is ours. Let's publish with it.
That this is what CA is going to publish, you mean?
Yes.
So I think one of the things we do, and we have an editorial team that works for the American Cancer Society. Each year, they give us a list of content areas that we've covered. Because one of the things it's important to me is that we not duplicate authors and content, because there's a lot of things we can cover just in oncology. So say we publish 3 things on breast cancer this year, it is unlikely we're going to publish something in breast cancer the following year. Okay. So we look for balance. And then in terms of authors, say we selected a senior author, say, would you, because I do not send an invitation to a group of authors. Okay. I send it to an author and say, please, you are at liberty to develop a team who you want to write with. That is fine. And they have complete independence in choosing who they work with. I make requests to them, try to include someone for representing an international perspective, and always try to include someone with a lived experience or a patient. Okay. That's the only guidance I have. But then that author is the ones who get to choose it. So it starts with reviewing what was done, where we want to do today. And then always you can always submit ideas for CA to consider. Some of them will accept, some of them will work with you on. Others will say, we're not really interested in this. But thank you very much for thinking about us.
Yes. Another question. I think it's time too late for you. I'll
Yeah.
come with the last question. After that, I will ask for your last speech about the research publication. The
Yeah.
last question a participant asked, and also is a question of mine. Most of the high-ranked journals published something about the predatory journals or fake journals or misinformation. But in your
Yeah.
journal, we don't see, I think you haven't published anything regarding the quality of publication, regarding predatory journals, regarding misinformation. You don't have any plan in future to do that?
So there was a paper that was published by Stacy Loeb. It was a social media-based publication and covering misinformation in that context, sort of how misinformation is being sort of disseminated globally and demonstrating that social media was not only a channel, but also potentially a way to combat misinformation. So we did cover misinformation in that perspective. Again, it's topical, right? The other thing we don't do beyond editorials associated with specific reviews, this is not a forum for that kind of content.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
What's your last statement for us? What's your recommendation as a last statement?
Well, I would say that, I firmly believe that all of us have an opportunity to really make advances in science. You do not have to necessarily be a better researcher because you're in Europe or the United States. That is not the thing. Okay. I know plenty of very effective researchers that are based outside of Europe and the United States and Canada. So that should not be something that should stop anyone from doing it. Again, most of what my comments are going to be, imploring you to do is really work with groups, because very few of us have succeeded in science as individual authors. Okay. So team-based research is important. Keeping that open perspective and honing down on the question and the methods by which you want to answer that question is also incredibly important. I think anybody can contribute. Okay. And you lose nothing if you send your manuscript to a high impact journal. The worst that will happen is it will be not reviewed. Okay.
Yes,
or the worst will happen, it'll be rejected without review. But on the off chance it's reviewed, the input from reviewers can be incredibly important.
all right.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your valuable time. Thank you for your valuable information. I hope this will not be the last one you'll see you in the program. Definitely, I'll connect with you in future. Even if the last thing you will reject me, that's all.
Okay, no, actually, this was fun. I'm glad I was able to do this for you.
Thank you so much, dear participant. Okay. Thank you for your participation on this end of our program for tonight.
Okay.
And see you God willing in the next month for new spotlight. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.